You're listening to Mistreated. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. You might have heard of PCOS. It's an acronym that stands for Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, a condition that affects 1.4 million Canadians. And globally, it impacts 1 in 8 women. For a condition that was identified just over 90 years ago, there's no one medication to treat it. The exact cause of it is unknown, it's not curable, and it is poorly understood. Some experts say PCOS looks to be at least 2 or 3 different conditions that have been lumped together, and there are calls for it to be separated into 2 different diagnoses. Others say the name Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome is misleading and that the name should be changed. According to reporting from The Conversation, an independent online publication from the academic and research community, women with PCOS are 20 to 40% more likely to experience negative health outcomes during their lifetime than the general population. This includes risks of developing hypertension, kidney disease, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, and gastrointestinal disease. It's also been associated with infertility and miscarriage, and it's common for women with it to experience pelvic and abdominal pain. Women with PCOS are also 2 to 3 times more likely to have type 2 diabetes. And when PCOS symptoms are missed or misdiagnosed, it also puts women at higher risk of heart failure and stroke. And every person has a unique presentation, and that might be part of the reason why 70% of women who have it remain undiagnosed. And our guest today describes it like a fingerprint, where every person's condition and every person's needs are a little different. Andrea Lewis is an actor and producer. You might recognize her from her role as Hazel on Degrassi: The Next Generation. She was diagnosed with PCOS in 2012. She's been open about talking about her diagnosis and what it's like to live with it. And she's been an advocate for those with it. She joins me now. Hi, Andrea Lewis. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to be able to speak to you because I'm a fan of the work that you're doing, especially with like glam culture right now. So congratulations
Thank
on that.
you.
Also wanted to talk to you about PCOS because this is something that you've been talking about for a while. Andrea, can you give us a definition of what it is?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome is what it breaks down into. But PCOS is a metabolic disorder and a hormonal disorder. It affects about, I'd say, maybe 1 in 10 women across North America and in the UK. It is something that essentially affects your reproductive health. So there's a various amount of ways that you can kind of be affected by PCOS, but typically it is by having little cysts on your ovaries. It usually causes you to have irregular periods, but this can also affect weight gain. This can affect your testosterone levels. This affects hair growth in many different ways for women. But again, these are kind of variants of it. So every woman I know has it in a very different way. It honestly behaves a lot like a fingerprint. It's also kind of the leading cause of infertility in a lot of women. And women are often diagnosed kind of later on when they realize they're trying for a child and they're having a really hard time with it. And then they discover like, oh, they actually have PCOS.
I wanted to ask you how you discovered that you had PCOS. How were you feeling when you went to the doctor? Because this is way back, I think, in 2012.
Yeah, 2012 is when I got diagnosed, but I'd say I probably had it before that because I always recall I had like a year where I don't even remember my period actually coming. But I was younger and period health is when I was growing up, at least, it was not treated as something that we should care about. It was treated more like taboo. It was like you didn't really talk about it. And so when I was truly diagnosed with PCOS, it was because I was in a relationship at the time. And I remember I just wasn't getting my period. And obviously, I was sexually active because I was in a relationship. I knew I was not pregnant, but I just was not getting my period. It just was not coming. And at the time, I was struggling with my weight. I was struggling with my overall mental health and just kind kind of thinking it was a lot of other factors. I went to my doctor. I said, I'm not getting my period. And I remember at the time, he literally gave me birth control and he was like, when you do get it, just take this and it will just make it regular. And I remember feeling like, but I'm not getting it. So, like, will I ever get to take this birth control? And I honestly did not at the time because my period did not end up coming. And I remember going back to him, and that's when he eventually set me up with some appointments with some specialists.
Mhm.
And I went to maybe two or three different specialists, and they all had very different, I guess, bedside manner is what I'll call it, like in degrees of care, because I remember going to one who was just basically like, you have to lose weight and then it will just kind of come. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was like always everybody was like, you'll struggle to conceive. And then I went to another that was like, oh, don't worry about it. You're young. It'll figure itself out. And then finally, at the time, I found a nutritionist who also specialized in PCOS. And
Mhm.
she was probably the first person who really made me feel like, oh, I can manage this thing. I can figure this thing out. But I felt all the emotions. I felt a bit embarrassed. I felt a lot of shame. I felt confused with it. I was really challenged by what you were supposed to eat or not eat, by the way you were supposed to exercise or not exercise. Because again, the emphasis is on lose weight, which it's a hormonal disorder. So if your hormones are out of whack, weight challenges are like that's all you're experiencing. You're gaining weight, you're losing weight, you're not moving with your weight. That's what happens when you have a hormonal challenge. And so anybody, whether you have PCOS or not, whenever I meet somebody and they tell me like, oh, their hormones are the issue, I'm always like, I completely can empathize with where they are at, because it affects so many parts of our lives, and feeling very out of control in your body is a big thing with PCOS. So oftentimes when they emphasize like lose weight, the women tend to go really hard on weight loss. Like it's like, oh, I
Mhm.
have to do high intensity workouts. I have to be not eating anything. And that actually affects you even more. That is too stressful. So in truth, why PCOS is so challenging is because it's something that requires really low stress. Like,
I want to talk more about that, but I want to go back to something that you said. Why did you feel embarrassed and ashamed when you found out that you had PCOS?
I think because I think anything that is when it comes to reproductive health that sounds different to other people, like that sounds different to your friends. It's like, yeah, like I said, when I was growing up, your period was taught in like the most basic way. It was like, okay, now that you have your period, you can get pregnant at any given moment, and you're gonna have PMS and just like a bad attitude or something like that. And so to kind of deal with something that your period is not coming on a regular basis, even though you are trying to function like every other woman around you, or that maybe you are going to have a challenge to have a child, things like that. And then on top of that, like that your body is not feeling like it's your own. You're gaining this weight, you're feeling really sad all the time or really depressed or really anxious, and to know that it has to do with this thing that almost sounds made up to people. I had a friend who had PCOS, and she was had really challenges with her weight. And I remember talking to her mom about it and saying that I too had this same thing as her. And her mom literally said, "Oh, I didn't actually think it was real. I actually just thought my daughter was eating too much candy. That's why she kept gaining weight." And I was like, "Oh, no, it's very real." And so I think I'm the first woman in my generation of my family to experience it. So it's like my mom didn't have it, my cousins that are older than me didn't have it, my grandmother didn't have it, and maybe they do have degrees of it, but I'm the first one to like be diagnosed and like have it. So you feel very alone in the process, which can feel shameful that you're just not, your body is not functioning the way people tell you women are supposed to function. That like that you should be just working out and not eating whatever you're eating that's causing you to have this problem. And
Wow.
oftentimes it's not that. It's like it's so many more things. It's so complex, and people are not necessarily empathetic to it. And so yeah, at first I remember when I had it, and like I said, I was in a relationship. I used to feel like the symptoms sounded fake. It was like, well, she could be really sad because she has PCOS. Oh well, she's just not losing any weight because she has PCOS, or she shouldn't eat that chocolate because she has PCOS. It's just like it just didn't sound like something that people could really get behind, especially because, it doesn't have like you don't wear the physical issue on it, right? It's something that's so inside. I remember having a doctor's appointment, and going in and telling the nurse that I had PCOS, and she was like, "You don't look like somebody that has PCOS. You don't look like that at all." And I was like, "Oh, well, what does it like look like?" And oftentimes, like I said, they kind of stereotype it. They think, "Oh, well, you're supposed to be obese, or you're supposed to be larger, or you're supposed to be something like that." And then women who really do have like a larger body mass, they are now not empathetic with those women. They're like, "Oh, well, no, it can't be PCOS that's got you this size. It has to be something else." And so it's very, it has like, I don't find that people outside of the PCOS community necessarily understand what it is that you're dealing with. And it's only kind of very recently, I had a friend who recently had a conversation with me about PCOS, saying that his wife was recently diagnosed. And so he was doing a lot of research and learning about it. But like, yeah, we're in 2025. When I was diagnosed, it was 2012. And no, I did not experience people being that empathetic to it.
I'm still like trying to process someone like something being called something as serious as PCOS being called the lazy girl disease because
Yeah.
if you have PCOS, you're at risk of developing hypertension, kidney disease, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, gastrointestinal disease, along with what you were talking about, infertility, miscarriage. Also, women with PCOS are also 2 to 3 times more likely to have type 2 diabetes,
Yeah.
experience heart failure and stroke. This has nothing to do with whether or not you can jog 5 miles in the morning or not, or you're
Yeah.
going to sit on the
Yeah.
couch and eat a bag of chips.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. And that's what's unfortunate, because I think as well, if people took a little bit more time to understand even their own family history. So within my family, both on my mom and my dad's side, is diabetes. And so when I eventually kind of understood that, I was like, oh, well, my PCOS is a direct result of the diabetes that's in my family. And so, yeah, like that has absolutely nothing to do with if I can run, if I can't run, all of those types of things. I had a conversation with somebody last year telling me that they trained for the New York Marathon and they have PCOS. They were like, I probably lost 1 pound in my training for a marathon. Your average, I guess your average person whose body, let's say, functions completely normally would not experience that. They would experience more weight loss. They would experience their body, going through more changes. But a PCOS woman could truly be doing all the things right and still not see any real change to their body. So oftentimes, I think you have to process it as like, well, I'm doing these things for my mental health. I'm doing these things because it brings me joy. I'm doing these things because it just feels good to me, versus worrying about how your body will change or not change. Because if you're comparing yourself to, say, your friends or the people around you, you'll just find yourself very frustrated. And I'm finally in that kind of place when it comes to my own PCOS. I understand how to manage it for me
Mhm.
and how to give my body grace. But as you said, it's like, yes, the amount of, oh, you'll be fine. Oh, yeah, just lose some weight. Oh, no, when it comes time for it for you, like when you want to have children, it will be easy. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had those kind of conversations, and they make me sad. They make me very frustrated, but I just realize I'm like, it is hard for people on the outside looking in to understand the importance of reproductive health and the ways that people who experience these things, PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, anything like that, the way that we are navigating through the world, it's not, yeah, it's not so easy as people would like to think.
The WHO says that up to 70% of women with PCOS don't even know that they have PCOS. I want to go back to when you first were talking to your doctor, and you said you probably had it before 2012. When
Mhm.
I had fibroids and my friends with endometriosis, when I speak to them, we are the opposite. We bleed a lot, and
Mhm.
the doctors, the common thing is like, oh, it's just a period. Just
Yeah.
take some Tylenol and buy some extra pads. It's just a period.
Yeah.
But you were experiencing the opposite, and when you
Yeah.
don't have, if your period isn't coming, you're at a higher risk of developing uterine cancer. So
Yes.
when you went to your doctor and you said, I'm not having my period, and they were like, well, just take, like, Take me
Birth
back to
control
that.
and come on.
Yeah, take me back to that, because it's like the doctor themselves don't seem to understand the severity of PCOS. And
Yeah.
did you ever have conversations with doctors who were just like, well, at least you're not getting your period, like you should be happy you're not getting your period?
Well, basically they were happy. They were like, well, at least you know you're not pregnant. Like, at least it's like, you're like, you're not getting your period. You know, you're not pregnant. Like, it's not that big of a deal kind of thing. Like I said, where I don't think the doctor was processing what I was saying, that I'm like, I was at this point, maybe 8 months in of not getting my period. I'm in a relationship with somebody. I have tested, I am not pregnant and I'm not getting my period. And he's like, it's okay. When you get it, just take this birth control and it will make it regular. And it's like, but I'm not getting it. And so this needs to be taken a little bit more serious. And just like you said, I have met before women who would tell me they weren't getting their period on a regular basis, or it was very irregular or something. And I'd say, oh, you should probably get that looked at. That sounds like PCOS. And they'd be like, oh, it's not that big a deal. I actually prefer it because it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting cramps or I'm not. And I am always in shock, but I always go back to, like I said, when I was growing up, and I can remember being in grade 7 or 6. I can't remember one of those grades, but like the period conversation that we had at school. And it
Mm.
was literally like a bunch of young girls, and they take us to the side and they kind of tell us, all right, yeah, you can get pregnant now. You might have PMS and you should have pads. Like, it was like boom, 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 just those things.
Check mark, check mark,
And
check mark.
yeah, and like, okay, done, go off, girls. and, and I remember too, like, because at that time, it was almost like it has a little bit of a badge of honor of being like, oh, I'm growing up as a little girl, when you're 12, when you're 11, you're 13, when you're those ages and you're kind of getting your period. And I remember my friends like, I got mine and I got mine, and a couple of us within the school year. And then the ones that didn't, now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, they must have felt a lot of anxiety thinking, oh, is mine coming or not coming? And so, yeah, I find that the idea of what a period is supposed to be for women, that I read that it's like it's supposed to be the report card. It is supposed to be the thing that indicates like your body is functioning the way it is supposed to function, and that it's not taken as seriously as it should be. So I have a best friend that we used to live together years ago, and she has fibroids. And I always used to say, I was like, yes, in this house, one of us has too much period and the other has no period, because she experienced all the things with her fibroids. And I was like, I can't even believe that we are also trying to find joy knowing that our bodies were functioning in this way that was really hard for us and really challenging. And we were both every single day just trying to kind of manage through it. But I'm like, she's having to bring an extra pair of pants with her somewhere because she may bleed out of her pants.
Mhm.
I'm fighting for my life just to get like a period to come on a regular basis. And so, yeah, I think people, and I always say, I'm like, I wish that somebody had told us when we were 13 years old that this is one of the things that could possibly happen,
Mhm.
that you should be thinking about your body overall and how it should be working, and that every little thing is something that is important to talk about. Like, and I wish that a doctor took me more seriously at the time. But I remember feeling, yeah, incredibly frustrated, because it really depends um, on, I guess, even their own level. And, not to kind of do this, because I do know that there are men who take this very seriously. But at the time, all the doctors that I dealt with for my PCOS were all men. And so I think maybe there was something with that and why they just kind of dismissed
Mhm.
the issue versus seeing it as like, oh,
Mm.
hey, this is something to call out. Mind you, it's like I was much younger. And like I said, where the idea of periods in my life, the way it was taught was like, oh, if a period's not coming, you're pregnant. And because I knew I wasn't pregnant, I was just like, okay, well, I guess it will show up when it shows up. And it's like now I track my period very intensely, but I always think when I was younger, I'm like, did I even pay attention to when it was coming, when it wasn't coming, what was happening to me, what wasn't happening to me? I have no idea if I did those things. So at the time, I remember I had moved to a new city. I was in my first serious relationship. I was figuring so many things out in my life. So also my period not showing up was just like a long list of things that I was kind of going through that was stressful. So it was one of those things that it's very easy for you to kind of put it to the okay, put that to the end of
Hmm.
the list. Like this can be dealt with a little later. As long as I know I'm not pregnant because of some, okay, I'm fine.
Did
Cool.
you
It's
ever, did a doctor ever tell you to maybe try to have a baby right away? Because that's something that's been suggested to people with endometriosis in order to treat their endometriosis, but that's
oh,
not,
really?
oh yeah.
Like to have a baby immediate, like just to
Hmm.
be like, oh, get the baby out of the way right
Yeah.
now.
Try to
Oh my
have a
gosh.
baby because
No.
that would stop the pain from the endometriosis.
No way. Oh my gosh. No, I'm like PCOS women are, I think, treated like as if we are just completely barren and not able to have a baby at all. And I think that's probably the most painful part of PCOS.
Mm.
Even to this day, as somebody who speaks about PCOS very frequently, I had somebody and I had to really correct them because it really hurt my feelings that they sent me a bunch of information on women who are infertile and miscarriages, and I was kind of like, oh, this isn't a PCOS, this is actually something else. And they're like, oh, well, I just thought that you could relate. And I was like, oh, well, not all PCOS women are unable to have babies. Like it's just maybe a little bit more challenging for us, and kind of trying to explain that. But when I was first diagnosed, no, it was spoken to me like as if I was just unable to have a child.
Mm. Why did you decide to speak up again about PCOS? Because you did it at a time when again, the stigma is still around period pain now in
Yeah.
2025. But when you started to talk about it, not very many people were talking about anything that had to do like with women's business.
Yeah, you know what? I think it was honestly just because I always felt like I needed a little bit of grace. Like I
Mm.
think as somebody who's like in a front-facing business, I'm an entertainer. I've been in entertainment since I was a little kid. It was like the pressures that are put onto entertainers, onto actresses specifically, in terms of your weight, in terms of your joy, like just like the continuous like pursuing of a really hard industry. I always felt like one, this is very hard. And so that was a challenge for me in itself. But then to also add in there that you had a reproductive challenge, that you had something hormonally that you were dealing with, a metabolic challenge, it just felt like, oh, if I could talk about anything kind of casually, PCOS just naturally came up because I felt like, oh, I I need to explain why I need some grace.
Mm.
Of if you see any changes or if you don't or if you do, is because I'm also navigating this thing. And I think also because I didn't really see the conversation that often. And I always think about it like that. Like if there's something that you're looking up and you're not really seeing a lot, it's probably your turn to start to talk about it. And I remember at the time I used to find just kind of forums,
Mm.
and the forums were so sad. Like all of the women were just talking about how depressed they felt, or their bodies, or they're trying to have a baby, they were really shockingly like, oh my gosh, like this is what the next 10 years or 20 years or 15 years of my life is going to look like. And so I think when I started to talk about PCOS, it just felt like a documenting of a journey of trying to figure it out. And I
Mm.
still always tell people that like I have a lot of tricks up my sleeve. I have a lot of things that I figure out. I have a lot of moments where I understand how my body is functioning, but I don't know everything. I've just had moments of being able to do a lot of research on myself,
Mm.
and so I'm always really open to speak about the things I've learned, just because I see that PCOS is so much, like I say, I describe it as a fingerprint. Every person I know may have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, like this one, and but it's so uniquely, made for them.
Mm.
But I also think PCOS is such a special disorder because while it has all these challenges, it has forced me to pay attention to my body very early in
Mm.
a way that I didn't see my peers having to pay attention to their body. My friends didn't have to pay attention to their body in this way. And I honestly think like as I've aged, I'm like, oh, it's allowed me to have to care for myself in a way that I wasn't before, mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually, like really having to think about what it's like to be a woman in this world, also what it's like to have a body that is truly in flow, and how to just have it like that all the time. And I am grateful. I'm grateful that I've had that journey, because I would not have, just like I said to you early on in my before my diagnosis, no, I was totally nonchalant about my body. I was completely like, oh, doop 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 doop, like life happens,
I,
things
I I
happen.
I think it's so great that you've turned it into, because I kind of feel the same way too about fibroids, because
Yeah.
I think before I had all this stuff, I was really disconnected from my body. I just didn't, even when I was pregnant. I think the first time that I felt one of my kids kick, I was like, what is happening? I am the
Yeah.
alien. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit, what you said about being a forward facing person,
Mhm.
how you look is a part of the gig. And
Yeah.
considering like your age, being younger, I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure there were days when there were frustrations and maybe your body wasn't doing what you wanted it to do, or maybe somebody said something about how you looked. You
Mhm.
have long hours. Maybe you can't eat certain foods that you would normally eat to manage your PCOS.
Mhm.
So, what would you say has been the most challenging part of learning how to manage PCOS? As you said, it's a thumbprint. Doctors don't really seem to know what causes it, how to manage
Yeah.
it, while you're trying to build a successful career in an industry that's so obsessed with women looking a certain way.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, I'm still navigating that. I did a film a few years ago, and we had a chunk of the shoot that was overnight. And for anybody that doesn't know, it was basically like 7 to 7. So it's like we'd start at 7 p.m. and we'd basically be ending by 7 a.m. And it was really hard. Overnight is hard, period. This was very hard. We were in a fairly controlled environment. And I remember feeling really worried, because I just kept thinking, well, the stress of this, no matter what I eat or how I work out or how much sleep I try my best to get, is going to take a toll on my body. And I may experience a flare up just because of the stress of it. So I had to kind of really focus on, I did a lot of meditation during that time. I did little walks during that time. I did a lot of like low and slow is what I called it, because I was aware that that may shift how my body shows up, regardless of what I'm eating, sleeping, all of those kinds of things. I've also had an experience that I had not this long ago, that I was filming, but I was doing a lot of travel. So with this filming, I was doing a lot of travel, wasn't really sleeping as well. And I didn't bring kind of like what I say my go-to supplement. So it's like I always have magnesium with me. I always have vitamin D with me. I always have zinc with me. And I didn't have any of those things with me. And yes, by the end of that shoot, I saw the difference. I looked different. I felt different, all of those kinds of things. And so it, it is one of those things that you are aware. And I think that's why it's like my journey has had to have space for me to just be the human, to not always be the entertainer, to not always be the person who's like shiny like a billboard, but to also recognize that I am a human. And so that doesn't always look perfect, and there's I can do my best, but that's just the space that I am in. And so I have had times when I can look on something and be like, oh, a flare up was happening here. Or, yeah, this is when no matter what I was trying, my body was just not reacting to it. This is when I shouldn't have been eating this thing. This is when, oh, I was actually experimenting with what I was eating. I can see all of those things. And so it is challenging, because yes, you are in an industry that would naturally pick yourself apart, even if you didn't have these kind of disorders. But I've been forced to give myself some care. So I used to do a lot of content on self-love. And at that time was because I was in the early stages of discovering my PCOS, and I was trying to navigate what my PCOS journey looked like. And it just, every time I would research, every time I would feel really frustrated, it forced me to have to get back to self-love, because it's so, yeah, it's so complex. And to see how much of your physical can be so out of control, because I'm fortunate. I don't suffer from the skin issues, but there's a lot of skin issues that come with PCOS. There's a lot of hair that you have out of control. There's women who are experiencing chin hair or loss of hair, and hair is such a focus for beauty, right?
It's our
It's something,
crown.
it's literally like
Yeah.
for so many, it really is. And so to experience those types of challenges, but still kind of have to show up every single day is really hard.
Yeah.
And so the women that I know that are still navigating even those spaces, and still figuring out ways to show up, to feel beautiful, to feel very excited about themselves. Yeah. I can't even explain to someone the nuance of what it's like to also have to be on camera and do those things.
Oh yeah, when I had in the midst of my fibroids, my hair fell out, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, and I went bald in certain places, and it was horrendous. We have about 5 minutes left. I mean, I could talk to you for like 5 hours on this, but I wanted to ask you two more questions.
Yeah.
You've said that PCOS is framed in a negative way. The focus is that you're not going to have children, or you'll have trouble getting pregnant. Why do you think it's important to flip that and to talk about the positives?
Because I think this world is already so hard. So you're like, if I was to also think about all the negatives for my body, I can't even imagine how it would function, because all of these things meet, right? Like the way I think in here is the way I feel in here is the way my body also shows up. I had a fertility doctor say this to me. She was like, no, women with PCOS actually have tons of eggs. She was like, you have tons of eggs. You just have to find them. That's all. You just have to get to them. And she was like, and I was like, oh, okay, and I was like, I can rock with that. Like that, it's there. All the stuff is there. I just gotta piece it together. And that's how I see PCOS. That is as unique as it is, as I've said, like that it's like a thumbprint. It is like this puzzle. It's this unique puzzle for you. And so whenever I see stories of, uh, people who do have PCOS, but they are having their first child, or they're having their third child, or they are functioning like their body is really working with them right now, or they're managing it, or they feel really good, or they've controlled their skin. It's never just that they did that. It's also that they felt better about themselves, that they started to treat themselves overall better. So I think, like you said, fibroids, endometriosis, these things are challenging. And we get to learn about our body in a way that nobody else does, even so much so as going to a doctor, somebody that you should trust, a professional, and sometimes them not even caring about your body as much as you do. And so I think you realize that your true survival is in positivity, in really seeing this thing as all the ways um, that you can experience joy, all the ways that you can actually flip the way it's talked about, flip the way that it's treated, and say, okay, this is not this thing. This is this for me. For my experience, I need it to look like this. And so PCOS, in order for me to manage it, I have to only think that this is just a unique body for me. Everything about my life is unique, and so is my body. And the fact that, I have to go on a slow walk every single day is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a good thing. And that I have to pay attention to what I put in my body, that, I have to think about my diet a little bit differently than everybody else, but still get to enjoy myself. That's not a bad thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes frustrating, but it's not a bad thing.
You're not broken. I should also mention, because you've said it a few times, about why you can't run, or you shouldn't run. It's because the stress that your body causes, right?
Yeah, technically. So really, it's like high intensity. High
Mm-hmm.
intensity workouts are not your friend. So oftentimes, I have a friend kind of going through this who told me like, "Oh, I'm doing all this high intensity and I'm not losing any weight." And I had to say to her, "You that is a PCOS problem. You might not have PCOS, but that is something that PCOS women deal with. The stress is too much. You actually would probably see more results
Mm-hmm.
if you slowed everything down. If you did focus on weights and lifting, but just slow. If you did focus on a long walk instead, if you want a little bit more resistance, get a weighted vest, things like that." I love running. I do run, but I always tell people I'm actually a very slow runner. I intentionally run slow because I just enjoy running. It makes me feel good, but I am not zipping through because that's too stressful for my body. I am truly doing a jog. I am doing something light. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. and not because I am pressuring myself to lose a ton of weight with it. And so, yeah, I have running journeys all the time. If I lose 2 pounds, if I lose 5 pounds by the end of months of running, I'm excited. I'm like, oh,
As long as you're healthy. Finally, you're from Canada, but you're building your career in Los Angeles. I wonder if there's any difference when you get treatment in Canada as opposed to the United States, and what you would say to policymakers about what it's like to live with PCOS.
I think living with PCOS is challenging because you have to do a checklist every single day. It's like, am I feeling sad because of life, or am I feeling sad because my my hormones are completely imbalanced and I'm doing something that's off and I haven't gotten enough sleep and my body's not functioning the way I need to. I'd say the difference that I've seen in the U.S., obviously specifically Los Angeles where I live, is probably the use of GLP-1s, Ozempic, anything like that is a lot more emphasized in the U.S. in terms of management of these kinds of disorders because of the weight problems that people often have. Whereas in Canada, no, I have to suggest it to the doctor for them to think that it's something I should take. And I had the tiniest stint on Ozempic and had that I was diagnosed from Canada, or rather prescribed from Canada. And you're not even going to believe I ended up gaining weight on it. So I was like, oh, this is not for me at all. Like, my body did not react to it well in any way. And I always think, I was like, if I had gotten it in the US, would I have had that experience? I have no idea. But again, and it was something that I had to bring up to my doctor as something to help me to manage my PCOS. And they were kind of like, I guess so. Versus in the US, I think it is actually a lot more talked about and more freely prescribed. So I'd say that that's the difference. But I think that, it's, as I said, to hear it being described as the lazy girl disorder, and something that is not thought about as, well, what is your family history, or how did this thing kind of come about, that is stumping us. I had a friend who was later diagnosed with PCOS after trying to have a child for over a year, and they called it like mystery infertility. And it was actually PCOS that was doing it. But at first, they diagnosed her with mystery infertility, and I just thought that was crazy. And so PCOS is still this thing where it feels like people are trying to avoid actually understanding it. The people who can really make a difference, and so that's why the community for it is so important. That's why you will find all these pages online and people like myself that talk about it, because in the community is where we've had to figure it out. Because if you were to go to the professionals, it's kind of dismissed. It's dismissed till this day.
Well, next on the next episode of Mistreated, we're speaking to a researcher who researches PCOS, and she also has it. And I'll ask her about Ozempic and about some of the treatments that are coming up. But Andrea, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for making time to speak with us, and also for what you're doing for the PCOS community. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and for you. This is great. I think there should be more conversations about women's reproductive health and the things that we go through, and and truly, like, if there's a link, or if just the challenges between PCOS, endometriosis, and fibroids, and how challenging they are, especially for women of color.
Mm-hmm. At least we're talking about it now, so it's a start.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
This was Mistreated for October 28th, 2025. You can follow our show on Apple Podcasts so you can get notified each time a new episode is available. We would love to hear your feedback. You can write me an email at mistreatedpodcast@tvo.org, or reach out to me on my social channels. We'd love to hear your stories, and you can send us a voice memo if you'd like to share your story on the podcast. This week's episode was produced by Matthew Amara and me, and edited by Colin Kish. Digital shorts by Ariana Longley. Production support from Jonathan Hallowell and TVO's Digital Media Services team. Lori Few is the executive producer of Digital. John Ferry is vice president, programming and content. Special thanks to our studio crew here at TVO. Thanks so much for listening.